Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Wednesday, January 3rd, 2024. This is The Excerpt. Today, what the killing of a Hamas leader in Lebanon might mean for regional tensions, plus Trump sues over the decision to disqualify him from Maine's ballot. And we look at who Trump supporters want as a running mate, according to recent polling. Saleh al-Aruri was killed in an apparent Israeli strike outside Beirut, according to Lebanon's state-run news agency and the Hezbollah-linked Al-Mayadeen media outlet. I spoke with USA Today domestic security correspondent Josh Meyer about the strike and its significance in the region. Josh, as always, thanks for hopping on The Excerpt today.
My pleasure, Taylor.
So as a refresher, I know we've discussed him briefly on the show before, but who is Saleh al-Aruri?
So Saleh al-Aruri, who was believed to be about 57 years old, was a top leader of Hamas, the U.S. designated terrorist organization. He was a leader of its political bureau, or the deputy of it, and was considered by many to be the de facto leader of Hamas' military wing in the West Bank. He traveled widely in recent years, and as we wrote in a story in October, he's believed to be the key link between Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran that are believed part of this axis of resistance against Israel.
Josh, how was he killed, and what do we know as of now?
Well, we don't know specifically. Israel has not commented on this, but what Lebanon's state-run news agency and what Hezbollah-linked Al-Mayadeen media outlet and others are saying is that Israel killed him and some other Hamas leaders in a drone strike while they were meeting in a suburb of Beirut in Lebanon, and that at least probably 5 or 6 or 7 people were killed, including some other top Hamas operatives. And they believe that this was done, of course, in retaliation for the October 7th terrorist attacks that killed more than 1,200 people and saw 240 people or so kidnapped and dragged back to the Gaza Strip to be held hostage.
Just how significant is his death, Josh? Does this change anything about the war in Gaza, or how about any other tensions across the region?
Oh, I think it does. I think it's going to really inflame tensions significantly. I mean, Hezbollah, which is a very, very powerful militant organization, it's got tens of thousands of rockets and missiles, has vowed reprisal because this attack happened on its home turf in Lebanon. It said that it won't let this go unaddressed. And, it could be a significant escalation in the war between Israel and Hamas, but also between Israel and Hezbollah. There's already been rockets fired by Hezbollah into Israel and by Israel into Lebanon. So I think authorities in Israel and elsewhere are very concerned that this could be a significant escalation. Israel has specifically not claimed responsibility for this. I talked to the Israel Defense Forces and they said no comment. And I think that's because they're trying to not aggravate Hezbollah, which could have significant consequences for the region and for the current conflict.
And, Josh, this was a targeted killing in Lebanon, as we've outlined. What does international law say about this?
So after the 1972 Munich terrorist attack, Israel went on this global campaign of assassinations. And while they say that they've been justified in doing that, many other legal experts say that you can't do that, of course, because it violates the rule of law, violates the rules of international conduct, and so forth. So it's never been really definitively adjudicated as to what kind of targeted assassinations a country can do on another country's soil.
Josh Meyer covers domestic security for USA Today. Josh, thanks for your time on this. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Taylor. Thanks, as always.
Former President Donald Trump yesterday sued Maine's Secretary of State for disqualifying him from the state's primary ballot because of his role in the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. The move opens yet another legal front in the question of whether voters in some states will be barred from selecting the Republican frontrunner. Election officials and courts in a number of states are considering whether Trump's actions on January 6, 2021, disqualified him under a part of the 14th Amendment known as the Insurrection Clause. 2 states, Maine and Colorado, have so far decided that Trump should be removed from this year's primary ballots. The decision from Colorado's top court has already been appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, while the decision in Maine was made by the Secretary of State, not a court. Despite ballot questions, Donald Trump remains the overwhelming Republican frontrunner. And if he's able to argue his way into getting his name back on the ballots in Maine and Colorado, the question remains, who else will be on the ticket? I spoke with USA Today Washington Bureau Chief Susan Page about who Trump supporters want as a running mate, according to recent polling. Susan, good as always to have you on. Happy New Year.
Hey, Happy New Year to you.
So, Susan, this latest USA Today Suffolk University poll revealed some interesting numbers as we begin this crucial presidential election year. One angle it tackled was about the possible running mate for Republican frontrunner Donald Trump. Susan, for starters, why do we not expect him to repeat his previous vice presidential pick, Mike Pence?
Well, Mike Pence did run with him twice, in 2016 when Trump won the presidency and in 2020 when he didn't. But their relationship ended badly when Pence refused to try to upend the counting of the Electoral College votes on January 6, 2021. We all remember that day. Pence has been cast out of Trump world. In fact, in our survey, not a single Republican supporter of Donald Trump mentioned Pence as a potential running mate. And I think that's probably a realistic assessment of his odds of getting the job again.
And in this USA Today Suffolk poll, when Trump supporters were asked to name their choice for his running mate, who came out on top, Susan?
So I think first we should note this is unscientific and probably meaningless, because the only person who matters when it comes to choosing his running mate is Trump himself. But we asked to just see where his supporters were thinking. And the candidate who came in first was Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor. 14% of Trump supporters said they'd like him as his running mate. I think that is unlikely to happen. Relations between the two of them have been pretty frayed over this primary campaign. But number two was Vivek Ramaswamy at 10%. He is somebody who you could conceivably see getting on the Trump ticket in these Republican debates. Ramaswamy has been the candidate up there defending him and repeating some of his main policies.
And, Nikki Haley has seen support grow for her presidential candidacy in recent months. According to this polling, Susan, how would Trump supporters feel if Trump selected her as running mate?
Well, 7% volunteered Nikki Haley's name when we asked them about the running mate they might like to see. That's also not impossible. Of course, they have had a relationship. She supported him in 2016. He appointed her as UN ambassador. Now, she has run against him for the nomination this year. She's tried to walk a line between criticizing Trump a bit, but not too much. So I think not impossible that she would get chosen. Although if you were talking to political strategists, they would say there's another candidate from South Carolina who also has maybe an even better shot at it. That would be Tim Scott, the senator from South Carolina, who ran briefly for the nomination, but then dropped out.
And did any other candidates make noise or catch your attention, Susan, in this polling as a potential VP and what Trump supporters are saying about them?
Well, let me mention just two. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., now running as an independent candidate. 2% of Trump supporters would like to see him as the running mate. And then there's Tucker Carlson, the conservative provocateur. 1% of Trump supporters say they'd like to see him on the ticket.
All right, Susan Page, always great insight. Happy 2024. And I know it won't be the last we hear from you in this big political year. Thanks so much.
Hey, thank you.
Harvard President Claudine Gay announced her resignation yesterday. The decision came after accusations of plagiarism in her academic work and a grilling by congressional lawmakers last month over her response to anti-Semitism on her campus since the start of the Israel-Hamas war. Gay was Harvard's first black president and began the role last summer. She resigned just 6 months into the job, the shortest of any president in Harvard history. After outrage sparked by her congressional testimony, Harvard's board released a statement reaffirming its support for Gay's leadership. More recent concerns of academic plagiarism were first presented to Harvard through a query from the New York Post, which had shared an anonymous allegation. Gay asked the Harvard Corporation to investigate, and after a review, Harvard said last month that it found no evidence of intentional deception or recklessness in her work. But it did find several instances that failed to adhere to the Harvard Guide for Using Sources. You can read more with a link in today's show notes. Well, it's been a couple years, but a big snowstorm could hit major East Coast cities this weekend, including New York and Washington. According to AccuWeather, for many locations along the I-95 corridor, it's been 2 winters since there was an inch of snow. This storm could change that. Computer models show a strong storm is likely, but still uncertain, with questions about the storm's path and how much cold air will be available near the coast, according to Weather.com meteorologist Chris Dulce. You can stay up on the storm's progress throughout the week with usatoday.com. Be sure to stay tuned this afternoon, starting at 4 p.m. Eastern, when my co-host Dana Taylor looks at the surge of e-bikes and whether we can all share the roads safely. She'll be joined by Stephanie Seskin, Director of Policy and Practice at the National Association of City Transportation Officials. You can find the episode right here on this feed. And thanks for listening to The Excerpt. You can get the podcast wherever you get your audio. And if you're on a smart speaker, just ask for The Excerpt. I'm Taylor Wilson, back tomorrow with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.